Thank you, Mrs. Tahmooressi. Lieutenant Commander Williams.
Thank you, Chairman Salmon. Thank you, Chairman Salmon, Ranking Member Sears, and Chairman Royce, members of the subcommittee and full committee. It's very critical, extremely critical, that we're holding this hearing today, and I can't thank you enough for doing so. I also want to say thank you to all the members who made it a point to come back for this hearing today, but you have to understand that your peers must recognize the fact that veterans are watching today, and for those of them who did not come back, this will be remembered. While the scope of this hearing is limited to the case of Sergeant Andrew Tahmooressi, I'd be remiss to remind this committee that Andrew's case is merely a symptom of a greater policy failure in how we address the needs of all of our returning soldiers. The failure is unfortunately even more pronounced when it comes to PTSD. And we throw this term around very lightly, but we have to recognize is that 30,000 new cases of traumatic brain injury occur every year in our services. And it doesn't matter whether or not soldiers go into a combat situation or not. The majority are from training exercises. We currently have over 600,000 veterans suffering from residual symptoms from traumatic brain injury right now in the VA system. And I'll tell you, no ifs, ands, or buts, our veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan often feel absolutely abandoned by our government, and I believe that they have a reason to feel so. Before I begin, my testimony is definitely longer than 5 minutes, so I'm going to synopsize and make sure I yield to others, but there's some points that I think really clearly have to be made. As we've addressed it over and over again, Andrew made a wrong turn, and we've thrown out a couple of terms related to PTSD with that by saying hypervigilance. But we've got to slow down for just a second and take a minute and understand what that means. Though Jill can't say it and others won't say it, we know for a fact that Sergeant Tahmooressi time in this prison has been worse than his time in both combat situations. He's going to come back to the United States and have to be treated for his combat PTSD, but also his incarceration PTSD. And to me, this is an abomination. 6 months, he didn't hesitate to say, aye, sir, to go off and serve. How dare we, as a nation, hesitate to get that young man back? We sit here in this city and discuss sending more young people off to die. I have a son who's 21 years old who's asked me over and over again, Dad, should I serve? And right now I'm telling him no. That's coming from a guy who did 22 years in the service. But no, because our government doesn't respect you enough. And how dare they treat him the way they do and the way they will. Andrew's incident is clearly triggered by his PTSD. The hypervigilance, when he made that turn while in Mexico, he made a decision to leave. When he got in his car, he was probably already triggered. And just so some of you understand, I suffer from MS. I have scars in my brain that are synonymous with concussive brain injury. So some of the symptoms that I'm talking about are symptoms that I live through on a daily basis. Emotional lability, sometimes depression, sometimes hypervigilance. I can walk in this hallway in Congress where I'm most protected and be afraid to walk in that bathroom. This is what these young men live through. And it's sad that we have one of our own right now being held in a prison while we talk about it. It is clear, everyone understands, he is not going to get the treatment that he is due. He has served the time, I believe, for any crime that he could have committed. So bring him home and let's treat him appropriately, but his treatment is not going to just be for combat PTSD. And remember, his treatment for his PTSD from being in prison rests on our shoulders. Now, I want to clearly say, I have the utmost respect for the Mexican government and the Mexican people. I am not one of those who is going to join into the fray of screaming for invasions and all those things. But what I am going to scream for is the one part of political diplomacy that has not been used yet. And Congressman Salmon, you pointed it out. It's called political compassion. Compassion is what's needed right now. Woe be it to us to let this case go by and then have to deal with the other 600,000 soldiers who are suffering who could make the same mistake. My testimony is much longer than 5 minutes. I would please ask the members to read the entire thing. I synopsized for you, but I'd like to leave you with one other little point. Every nation on this planet and all people are judged, no matter what religion you are, whatever faith you are, we are all judged by what we do for the least of us. Andrew is one of the best of us, America's treasure. And if we can't treat the best better than we treat the worst, how dare you ask another gentleman to put on a uniform? Thank you so much, sir.
Lieutenant Commander Williams, without objection, your testimony, your full testimony, and everybody's full testimony will be entered into the public record. And I appreciate your great comments. Sergeant Buchanan.
Mr. Chairman, ranking member, members of the committee, thank you for the invitation to testify today. I am forever grateful for the committee's interest in the overview of Sergeant Andrew Tahmooressi dire need to get Veterans Affairs hospital medical treatment as soon as possible. First off, I want to say, you know, I knew Andrew. I was a corporal when he came to our unit, and I was a guy that made sure he had a haircut on Monday and a fresh shave every day. But if you guys have any questions to who Andrew truly was, I recommend you guys ask Sergeant Mark Podlowski back here, his best friend, brother in arms. The two were inseparable the entire time I knew him. So, you don't truly know a man until you've deployed to combat with that individual. I had the pleasure of both taking part in training and deploying to Afghanistan with Sergeant Tahmooressi. He was truly one of the best junior Marines I've ever had the pleasure of working with. You task something out to him, there was not a second thought. It was going to get done. He was the kind of guy that his peers looked up to. He, from the get-go, the first day I met his group when they came to our unit, Sergeant Podlowski and Sergeant Tahmooressi stood out amongst their peers. He had a humble attitude, never talked back, was always eager to learn and be the best Marine he could be. This was a Marine who received a combat meritorious promotion. Let me go back. Sergeant Andrew Tahmooressi was meritoriously promoted to corporal. That alone speaks to somebody's character. To be combat meritoriously promoted in this day and age amongst our field, it's a rarity and an honor amongst our gun club, if you want to call it. This alone speaks to the volumes to what kind of individual Andrew is and can attest to his character. On Andrew's last deployment, he saved the life of a fellow Marine by securing tourniquets on him after he stepped on an IED, improvised explosive device, causing him to lose both of his legs. It's in these moments that a man's true character is tested, and Andrew shined. He did not run away. He ran to help. Congressman Matt Salmon, Ed Royce, and Duncan Hunter, I want to personally thank you guys for you guys have spearheaded our cause in getting Andrew home, and from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you personally. They have all sent out multiple letters in support to the State Department and the White House. I also had the opportunity to sit down face-to-face with Congressman Ed Royce, and from the get-go, we had his immediate and unflinching support towards Andrew's release. The crime with which Andrew is being charged requires intent. Weapons trafficking is not a negligent crime, and his true intent has been proven as being an accident. Please help us get this combat veteran home and into the VA for much-needed medical care. Every day he's down there is a day longer that it's going to take for him to readjust in a civilian life. You know, every Marine, every every military member comes back with different luggage from war, and we all have different, it takes different amounts of time to readjust in the civilian life, and we all have our good days and bad, but isolation is the last thing anyone needs. Please help us get him home and the treatment he so direly needs. Thank you.
Thanks, Sergeant Buchanan. Mr. Hegseth.
Members of the Foreign Affairs Committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I want to thank Chairman Salmon, Chairman Royce, Ranking Member Gabbard, U.S. Marine Duncan Hunter, and everyone else who came back from their districts to be here for this important hearing. It's greatly appreciated. Your forward-leaning support of veterans in our military matters and is noticed. I also want to thank my fellow witnesses who are allowing a soldier to hang out with a bunch of Marines. Ms. Tahmooressi, your courageous advocacy on behalf of your son inspires us all. It really does. Sergeant Buchanan, thank you for, and Sergeant, thank you for having the back of your fellow Marine. And Lieutenant Commander Williams, using your platform the way you are makes a huge difference. Thank you very much. My name is Pete Hegseth. I'm the CEO of Concerned Veterans for America, and our mission is to fight for the freedom and prosperity of all Americans, but specifically for the well-being of veterans. And we represent a growing number of veterans and military families who refuse to accept the status quo in Washington. We fight like hell, aggressively and passionately, to ensure that America's veterans are no longer treated like second-class citizens in their own system and in their own government. The ongoing situation with Sergeant Tahmooressi, who's now been held for 184 days by the Mexican government, is yet another example of our federal government leaving a man behind. In the military, we leave no man behind. We are leaving a inactive reservist behind in Mexico. Andrew Tahmooressi is a United States Marine. He's a non-commissioned officer. He's a machine gunner, an infantryman, a decorated combat veteran who deployed twice to Afghanistan, meeting the enemy in fierce combat. Sergeant Tahmooressi literally saved the lives of his fellow Marines. He was so good, as everyone has said, a meritorious battlefield promotion, which is nearly unheard of. His gunnery sergeant called him, your gunnery sergeant, called him an outstanding Marine and a standout guy. There's no doubt this guy is an American hero, plain and simple. But his service comes with a physical and psychological cost. And let me assure you, post-traumatic stress, or PTS, it's real. And if left untreated, especially for those who partook in the horrors of war, it can become a lifelong disorder that you manage. And it can also be deadly. As many people here know, 22 veterans in America today take their own lives. Many more struggle in silence. As has been reported widely already, Sergeant Tahmooressi was diagnosed with PTS before he crossed that border and attempted to take his own life in a crowded Tijuana prison. The condition has only been exacerbated by his treatment there and his lack of treatment in the United States. He doesn't face post-traumatic stress because he's weak, or because he's a coward, or because he's a victim. He simply faces the invisible wounds of war. And right now, he faces them alone, largely alone, with a few advocates fighting for him on the outside. Left untreated, these hidden wounds that can lead to the bottle, they can lead to reckless behavior, they can lead to detachment and societal withdrawal. Following my tour in Iraq, I know I dealt with all three. But much worse, these scars can end in suicide. Unless, of course, there is a lifeline. Seeking care for post-traumatic stress, either through peer-to-peer counseling, alternative therapy, family support, or proper care at the VA, saves lives. Those who manage post-traumatic stress, they're not ticking time bombs. They're not victims. With the right treatment at the right place at the right time, most soldiers and Marines, like Sergeant Tahmooressi, come back and become the leaders and the pillars of our communities that we need so badly in America today. My bottom line to this committee and to this government and to the Mexican government is this: Sergeant Tahmooressi needs and deserves immediate treatment for his post-traumatic stress. And shame on anyone, at home or abroad, who doesn't move heaven and earth to make that happen. In combat, men like Sergeant Tahmooressi never have enough troops or enough ammunition, never have enough time or enough equipment, but they still get the job done. The same should be expected from the United States government. No excuse for inaction is good enough. He should be released immediately. End of story. You know, before leaving home for this testimony, I kissed my 2 young sons on the forehead. And I'm willing, as a soldier and a citizen and a father, to someday lend them to the cause of freedom's fight. But in doing so, I only ask that my government do everything possible before, during, and after they serve to stand right beside them and be there for them. Ms. Tahmooressi expected the very same thing. Is she going to receive it? Is the million-dollar question. In closing, the contrast before this committee, this Congress, and this White House could not be more stark. And it's been mentioned twice, but it's worth mentioning again. This administration negotiated with the Taliban and exchanged 5 terrorist killers with American blood on their hands for the release of Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, a soldier who deserted his unit on the front lines 2 months into his first tour of duty. And as everyone has heard, Sergeant Tahmooressi did 2 tours of duty, a highly decorated Marine. Sergeant Bergdahl cost American lives. Sergeant Tahmooressi saved lives. Does that not matter? It's time to bring our Marine home, long overdue, and get him the care that he has earned. Thank you for this opportunity, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you. I'm going to yield myself 5 minutes for questions. And Mrs. Tahmooressi, I'd like to start with you. Interesting enough, Mr. Hegseth, after the release of Bergdahl, there was a lot of media scrutiny about that arrangement, that trade, and the President very boldly said on national TV that as Commander-in-Chief, he leaves no soldier behind. That's his policy. I just want to ask you, Mrs. Tahmooressi, has the President personally called you? Has he personally contacted you about this case?
No, he is not, Chairman.
To the best of your knowledge, has the President made any kind of a phone call to the President of Mexico to intercede on Andrew's behalf?
Not to my knowledge.
I know I had a personal meeting with Vice President Biden the week before the President was to speak with the President of Mexico, and Vice President Biden assured me that they would be on top of it, and I was told after the phone call that the President did not bring it up. Very, very disappointed. Can I ask you, Mrs. Tahmooressi, how have the Mexican authorities treated you as you search for information regarding your son and his location? Have they been forthcoming, or have they left you in the dark during this process?
Well, the judicial process is one that is done in secrecy, in a sense, because I attend all of Andrew's hearings, and supposedly it's supposed to be open to public, yet each and every hearing I attend, the honorable presiding judge asks that I sit out in the hallway because there's not enough space in the courtroom. So I have not been given any information forthcoming from Mexico officials other than a fact sheet that did come out some time ago, yet I had some questions on their facts.
I was mystified when you told me that the judge would not allow you, the mother, to come in and sit in the hearings, that you actually have to sit outside.
Correct, and it's interesting that it's always a hearing room that's selected without even a window. All of them have windows except for the one that Andrew's court proceedings are going in.
How about our folks at the consulate there in Tijuana? Have they been pretty helpful?
Well, the local department, that would be Consul General Andrew Erickson, who actually served with Andrew in Afghanistan in 2012. From a personal standpoint, like making sure Andrew has a toothbrush, making sure that I get escorted in and out safely, because there is travel warnings. In the beginning, they had red alert travel warnings to Mexico. Americans were supposed to keep a low profile because of a high risk of kidnapping. So they do help escort me in and out. However, it is the State Department local level on April 14th that translated the VA medical record that I ran to San Diego and got. And it is the State Department in Tijuana, Mexico on April 14th that flew in Dr. Regal from the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City. Dr. Regal did a full evaluation that day. I witnessed it. And I received the report from the State Department approximately May 1st with the diagnosis of PTSD. It was translated and supposedly given to the judge, but it was never used it was never entered into court as evidence to substantiate PTSD. It was not considered. I don't know if it was because it wasn't considered legitimate. It was from it was a U.S. source, and that's why just 2 days ago, 6 months into this ordeal, a Mexican psychiatrist has come in to validate combat-related PTSD, which I just find ironic because they don't send their military to combat. So, but the Mexican psychiatrists are considered legitimate, but not Dr. Regal, who did a full evaluation from our U.S. Embassy in Mexico City on April 14th, but those documentations have not seemed to be effective or considered of high importance.
Thank you. Lieutenant Commander Williams, you mentioned in your testimony that him being in prison for 6 months is extremely counterproductive to his PTSD. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
I was afforded with Jill an opportunity to speak to Andrew, 3 days ago. And it was my first time speaking to him because I literally tried my best to keep this off of Montel and keep this on Andrew, and knowing that when I enter this fray, the press would maybe take it in the wrong direction. When as I spoke to him, he said to me the other night, specifically, we talked for a couple minutes just in general, how you doing, you okay? And I said to him, it's an ignorant question for me to ask you, Andrew, but you know, Marina Marie, how are you doing? And he paused and he said, I have a hard time keeping the bad thoughts out. I have a hard time keeping the bad thoughts out. This is 2 days ago. If I have a hard time keeping the bad thoughts out, this is a key statement from a person suffering right now. And he was sending that message, I think, clearly to let me know and let his mom know it's not going well. But he couldn't say it in any other way. So why am I so concerned? You know, again, this is not about me, but most of you know I've suffered from MS for the last 20 years, diagnosed in 1990. My MS, I have scars in my brain that are close to the equivalent of a concussive blast. So these symptoms I recognize. I'm in a treatment protocol for them now, and I'm doing very well. However, I know 1 day, 2 days without treatment that I have, these things come back. And unfortunately, you know, Andrew being involved in a concussive blast, we've just now determined he has traumatic brain, PTSD, but they really haven't looked at his brain yet. And there may be residual effect that's going to cause this a little bit longer to be treated. And now for him to sit in a prison, and I know we're hesitant to say it, but the rumors are that he has been beaten. He's been treated like a POW, not a person incarcerated for making a mistake. And he said it to his mother, and he said it to his peers. His treatment here is worse than being in Afghanistan. And for a person who's suffering to make that statement, he knows it. So when we get him home, this is just the beginning. But it's also an example of what we need to make sure we take care of for the other guys and the other soldiers that are serving and suffering the same way.
Thank you very much. The chair yields to the gentlewoman from Hawaii.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your very heartfelt testimony. I wish we had more time. I know it's very difficult to capture everything that you are conveying in such a short period of time. I understand and can appreciate everything that each of you has communicated with regards to post-traumatic stress, with regards to the treatment that Andrew needs. But I want to take a step back for many people who may be watching or listening who have not worn the uniform, or who have not had a family member who's worn the uniform and who haven't had that firsthand experience that each of you has related, and put us in the position of any one of us going there, any one of us missing that turn, any one of us not seeing a sign, and ending up in a position where you're getting arrested, you're surrounded by the military after making an honest mistake. I think each of us would probably be pretty pissed off. Each of us would probably not be acting in the calmest of manners, understanding the unknown that lay ahead. Anyone in that situation. And I think that on top of that, understanding the strong case of his character that you've made, the strong case of his service, his commitment, what he's done, the commitment he's had throughout his life, only adds to that, that understanding, and really goes to the point of the fact that what is occurring, there's no excuse. There's absolutely no excuse for it. And the most unfortunate thing is it appears that bureaucracy is being allowed to be used as an excuse for his continued incarceration, and is really being blamed for why no action has been taken. As many of you said, whatever it takes, he should be brought home. My question for Jill is after the September 9th hearing, it's been reported that your son's lawyer expressed confidence that a favorable ruling may be close, and I'm just wondering if the assessment has changed since then, and how you expect things in the near term to go from the Mexican judicial standpoint.
Thank you for that question. Mr. Fernando Benitez is Andrew's current criminal defense attorney. We had two attorneys previous to Mr. Benitez who did great disservice to Andrew. They were not of the ethics that I had expected, especially since the first one was actually, I selected off of the Department of State reference sheet in Tijuana, Mexico. But Mr. Benitez does state a high degree of confidence. There was a hearing on September 9th where the video surveillance was watched for 8 hours, and it definitely corroborated Andrew's truthful and forthcoming statement, and it did poke holes in the statements by the Mexican officials and customs agents. So for that reason, Mr. Benitez believes that he is very close to resting the case now, and he expects a verdict or an action of either dismissal or acquittal within the next couple of weeks, especially since the two psychiatric evaluations, one from the defense and one from the prosecutor, has just been done and filed in the court yesterday and ratified at 5:30 in the afternoon. So I believe we are just several weeks away. We are hopeful.
Thank you. And for Mr. Williams, I know that you, as well as Jill and others, have talked about specific actions, a phone call from the president. You mentioned the petition that over 100,000 people have signed. What specific actions do you feel will actually truly be effective in gaining Andrew's release that we can advocate for and that we can push for here?
Congressman Gabbard, first I want to apologize for not acknowledging you as a ranking member, and also want to say thank you for your service. It is right now 11:05. If this hearing is going to stop in the next 10 minutes, I think the president needs to pick up the phone in 15. Make the call. Make the call today. If you're not going to call President Nieto, call this woman, this one's child. He's a father. I'm a father. I need to say something else that I didn't say earlier. The reason why I jumped out, decided to become more public, and please believe me, it's not about me. I have a daughter right now who has been going through cancer treatments for a year. She's now in her second round. It came back. It's the worst of it the last couple of days. This woman, since June, has sent a prayer to my family every day for my daughter. So those who wonder why I'm here, this is a father and a mother who have two ill children. I know a lot of us who suffer from post-traumatic stress don't like to use that term ill. But if we use it appropriately and use it the right way, that means that it can be treated. It's an illness. And so I would beg that the president make that call. If that can't happen, then I would say that I would beg that maybe this committee, we issue a joint statement directly to President Nieto and say, the world's watching. It's time for you to act.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the full chairman of the committee, or the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Royce.
Yeah, I wanted just to go to Sergeant Buchanan, and I think all of us are hopeful that your friend Andrew will be back here soon. But what advice, I think, I'd ask, would you give him and us on how best to approach his PTSD treatment? And I would also ask that question of Mr. Hegseth, since he's a veteran and works regularly with those who have gone through something of what Andrew has gone through.
Thank you for your question, Congressman Royce. He needs to be with his brothers, the guys that trained with him, deployed with him, know what he's going through. It doesn't matter what branch, what your job was. We all wore a uniform, and that's what we have in common. And that's something outside of the military when you're readjusting, you know. That's something about Sergeant Tahmooressi is his humble attitude. He has a servant's heart. He always wants to help. And part of the problem with that is he'll help other people before he helps himself. And that he had just started the VA treatment, the process. He was just at the beginning getting diagnosed. That's nothing. That's the first of many steps, and it's a long process, the VA system. And you know, we need to get him in there, get him with his friends, start the healing process, because like everyone was saying, isolation is the last thing a Marine, a combat vet needs, that's suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. So.
And I'll go to Mr. Hegsless. You mentioned also, I mean, the trade that the United States made for 5 senior Taliban leaders, including former director of intelligence for the Taliban, one of their senior commanders, one was chief of staff. The chief of staff was implicated in the death of thousands of Shia. All 5 had been involved in coordinating attacks against American and coalition forces, and 3 of the 5 were directly linked to al-Qaeda. Now, the United States has taken an action to get them released, and one of those 5 in Qatar today already told a senior Taliban official, this was reported on the news, that his next step would be to try to return to Afghanistan in order to carry out attacks against American and coalition forces there. Let me ask you your thoughts on this and what can be done in order to secure the release of Sergeant Tahmooressi.
Me and my men guarded those 5 detainees at Guantanamo Bay for a year. This is something that's incredibly personal for all those that have served, and specifically those that have served in those combat zones. To know what it took, to know the number of boots that were on the ground that sought those men, to lock those men up so that we don't have to face them again, and then to know that our government is willing to give them away. And then a rose garden ceremony with a family of someone who everyone knows who's looked at the case deserted his unit. And then Ms. Tahmooressi can't get a phone call. And we hear all about a pen and a phone. Use your pen and your phone and call the President of Mexico and get this done. It's not hard, and it's not political. It's personal for people that know it. And Sergeant Buchanan was perfect on his remarks about the VA. It's peer-to-peer counseling. It's being and talking to the men that you've served with. And oftentimes at the VA, there's also alternative therapy. The question also, and this is not the hearing for the Department of Veterans Affairs, but Ms. Gabbard, you talked about bureaucracy. How many people, how many Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Smiths are attempting to access mental health care at the VA, and then they're made to wait weeks and months? You know how many mothers I meet on the road when we do events that come up to me and said, I lost my son to suicide as he was waiting for treatment at the Department of Veterans Affairs? That is a scandal just like this one, and another instance where our nation turns its backs, as Lieutenant Commander Williams talked about, on those who have given so much for this nation. So trading deserters for terrorists and making veterans wait for basic care, unacceptable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Chair recognizes Chairman Smith, who is Chairman of the Subcommittee on Human Rights and the former Chairman of the Veteran Affairs Committee.
Thank you very much, Chairman Salmon. And I think this hearing, perhaps more than anything else that's happened so far, will give additional hope to Andrew, and hopefully he knows the strong bipartisan support the concern, the prayers that go out for him. And I would just say to my colleagues, you know, I'm not surprised, I'm not shocked that the President has, until this moment, and Montel Williams, I think, made an excellent point about pick up the phone, Mr. President. This is not calling Rouhani on behalf of Saeed Abedini, a pastor from the United States. This is calling a friend and ally with whom we have a robust trading relationship. It is a dereliction of duty on the part of the President that he has not made this phone call, and not just one, but then put the full court press on the Mexican government to release Andrew. Let me just say also, and Matt Salmon mentioned I was chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee. I served on that committee for 26 years, including a stint as its chairman. PTSD, as I think you know, Pete, during the Vietnam War, there was denial about PTSD. That argument has long been over, and the care, even though it is often delayed, that the VA provides, they have literally written the book on how to care for veterans who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And delay is denial. 1 day of a delay is denial. And I also think it needs to be pointed out that 6 months of inattention to any service-connected disability, be it physical or psychological, causes that condition to fester and to worsen. So the ongoing appeal to the Mexican government today is very simple and very direct. Release Andrew now, today, so that he can procure badly needed treatment for PTSD. He is a hero. He is a man that the American people and this Congress looks up to and says thank you, and yet he languishes in a Mexican prison, and we need to do more. But again, we write law, we fund programs, and we do oversight as Congress. It is the executive branch that has direct contact with the President of Mexico, and that phone has to be raised to his ear, and he has to not get off the phone until Andrew is released. So again, I want to thank you. This is powerful testimony, and to hear a mother make such a articulate and strong appeal on behalf of her son, and then have 3 very distinguished Americans do so in a way that has to be heard in Mexico City. It has to be heard at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. It has already been heard by members of Congress, and my colleagues have done yeoman's work. And again, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Chairman Royce, Duncan Hunter, and others who have done so much for so long. But the President has to do his part. He has to be, Andrew has to be on a plane getting that health care that he needs. Delay is denial. I thank my friend, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I'd like to now recognize the former chairman of the full committee and a great American, the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Rotley.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the chairman of the full committee. Wow, incredible witnesses. Thank you so much. Jill, I wanted to follow up on a few things that we discussed when we met in Miami. I'm aghast that you still have not heard from the White House. Do you play golf?
No.
No? Because I know that you're a nurse at Miami Children's Hospital. That's just literally blocks away from the Biltmore, beautiful hotel in Coral Gables. They have a wonderful golf course. Should we invite the President to play a few rounds of golf with you? Get his attention? Mr. Chairman, I would like to request unanimous consent to submit a statement from a constituent of my congressional district, Olivia and John Hammer. Jill knows them well. They're parents of a Marine veteran, John Hammer, who similarly was arrested, detained for weeks and weeks and weeks in Mexico. It's an absolute shame. It's a disgrace that we even need to be here to say. It says quite a lot about the priorities of this administration. It should not be up to the moms. It should not be up to the wounded warriors, to the families, to the friends, and Mr. Tahmooressi has so many friends, to wage this awareness campaign to get our government to act, to press the administration for Andrew's release. And I wanted to ask you about the process you've had to go through with the lawyers in Mexico. And I'm recalling some of the same things that, that Olivia had to go through, because it's important that we recognize the similarities between the cases. The Tahmooressi took a wrong turn, ended up in the twilight zone, and we must get him back. I know that the consulate is prohibited from providing legal advice, but it does give folks some help in finding a suitable lawyer. Both you and Olivia had to go through a number of lawyers before you could find a good and trustworthy one. Is that correct? And could you describe the process that you went through to find your lawyers? And the consulate provided you with a list, but was it a list of vetted individuals, or was it more like, okay, here's an abbreviated version of the old-fashioned yellow pages, select from this? And I'll have you respond in a second. And finally, I'd like to ask about Andrew's health and his injuries from Afghanistan, and ask the panel for their recommendations on how we can better serve our combat veterans who return home. As we've heard, Andrew has suffered at least 2 separate concussions. We heard today that he has not been evaluated for traumatic brain injury. There should be no reason why our veterans should return home, don't get the immediate attention that they deserve medically. What do we need to do to make sure that these brave men and women aren't falling through the cracks when they return? And as we heard from Mr. Williams and Mr. Hegseth, who testified, the alarming number of veterans who take their lives every day. We need to do more as a society, as a government, to address this issue today. So, Jill, I'll start with you. If you could tell us about the process of finding a lawyer.
Well, when I got that phone call on April 1st, Mom, I've been arrested, get me an attorney, I did the responsible thing. I reached out to my Congresswoman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and her staff led me to George Rivas of the Citizen Services in Washington, D.C. He said, go to the website. There's a website, Tijuana, Mexico, U.S. Consulate Services, and look at the list. And so I started down the list, and I reached this gentleman's name. I phoned him. He answered the phone. He spoke English, which it is, Tijuana is 10 miles away from San Diego, yet there is a language barrier. So this particular lawyer spoke English, actually U.S. trained, and he was listed as a criminal defense attorney. That experience, I thought I was getting a reputable attorney, and he was probably the most scrupulous and exploitive person I have ever met in my life. He served in the disclosure statement before the judge as attorney and translator, and he scripted a mistruth. He scripted a mistruth. He perjured my son. He scripted a mistruth and told Andrew that this is Mexico. Forget anything you know about American law. And this is Mexico, who I believe we've sent $100 million to in the past couple of years to help them reform their judicial system. This is an attorney that told Andrew that he must say that he just arrived in San Diego that day. He was rushing to meet a friend. He's never been to Mexico before, and he got lost. When Andrew called me that afternoon and said, Mom, where did you get that attorney? He just lied, and he told the judge that I've never been to Mexico. Mom, I stood up twice. The prosecutor was there. The defense attorney, Andrew, he stood up twice to say no, because he must have understood that. No, I've been to Mexico. This attorney hushed him, told him to sit down. And when I called up this attorney that night and I said, you said what? I said, my son has been to Mexico, and my son never lies. My son has some faults, we all do, but lying has never been. He's a man of integrity. He said to Mrs. Tahmooressi, this is Mexico. You have to forget everything about America. We don't practice common law. We do oral arguments. they are not going to check any evidence. I said, they're not going to pull bank accounts? Because I pulled his bank account. I see that he's been in Tijuana twice. And I got validation that he had walked into Mexico with his best buddy friend, the Purple Heart, that invited him to San Diego. Within hours of arriving to San Diego, they were already in Tijuana. There must be a popular place in Tijuana for the Marines to visit. So I knew he had walked into Mexico one other time, and he had told me he had walked out of Mexico that day when he got in his truck purposefully to head back north to San Diego because he had stayed in a hotel the night previous, the Old Town San Diego. He was headed back because he got triggered in Tijuana upon nightfall. He got triggered and thought, I need to get out of here and to my friends in San Diego. So that was my experience with the first Mexican attorney, and that is why Andrew's original court date, I think it was August, I'm not sure the exact date, but he had to go into court and say, Judge, I request that this attorney no longer represent me. You know, in a sense, I fired this attorney because we could not proceed with the lies. We could not proceed with, we could not proceed with the lies. That was my experience with selecting an attorney. And by the grace of God, though, a great man from serving California, he is a criminal defense attorney, Phil Dunn. He had heard me on a radio station or TV maybe, and he called me and said, Jill, I'm sorry, but you don't know how to pick Mexican attorneys. I'm going down with you, and we're going to pick an attorney. So we did. We went down there, but this time the State Department, the same State Department that referred me to the list, we met in their boardroom, and we said, please provide us a list, a short list. And as we typically rank number one as preferable, do provide us a short list. So they did. They provided a short list within hours. We went interviewing at least 4 to 5 different firms and selected Mr. Benitez the next day.
Thank you very much. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Rohrbacher.
Thank you very much to all of the leaders who have provided their time and effort to make sure this hearing, which is an incredibly significant hearing, is happening. And let me thank Mrs. Tahmooressi for sending me a tweet the other day to draw my attention to something that I didn't know this was even going to happen. And so I did redo my schedule. Thank you. We are defining ourselves today. We define ourselves by our actions, especially in times of crisis. Andrew defined himself. At a time of war, he joined the United States Marine Corps. I come from a Marine family, and I know what that means. And I'll just say that I also know that Andrew did not do anything intentionally wrong. I went to Tijuana and I retraced his steps. And on the way back, when I drove out of that parking lot and made that turn to the left, it appeared, I can just testify to everybody today, it appeared that I was going into California. And once you made that turn, there was no going back until you were in Mexico. There is no doubt that this problem was not caused by any intention of Andrew to, in some way, not respect the law of Mexico. And that is very evident. Today, Mexico is defining itself, however. Mexico is defining itself to us. I have a warm spot in my heart for Mexico, and I like Mexican people. And I think that I'm speaking for most of us here today. And Mexico we look at as a friend. I hope the people of Mexico are listening, because if this thing isn't cleared up soon, there will be hostility that they don't deserve being heaped upon them, because they will be proving themselves to us that they aren't our friend, and that we shouldn't treat them that way. If they treat an American hero like that, we can no longer treat Mexico as our friend. I would hope in a very short time, we can celebrate together with the people of Mexico, with you, and re-cement a friendship. But it will all depend on whether they do the right thing now. They will define themselves that way. We are defining ourselves. The President is defining himself. Shame on President Obama for not making a 30-second telephone call to the President of Mexico and getting this thing settled a long time ago. He's the commander-in-chief. That means he's personally the commander of people who volunteer to fight our wars. And if they don't think that he cares enough about them to make a phone call, what are they going to, they're going to feel they're betrayed, and they are being betrayed. I would recommend, Mr. Chairman, that I understand the President is in Washington today, that we not wait for the President, and that we put a conference call into the President, or that today, within the next half hour, we call the White House and personally request that each and every one of us go and see him to have a meeting to talk to him about this case. This has gone on long enough. We've got a hero in
Mr. Rohrabacher, the chairman would like to respond.
If the gentleman will yield, I will just relay that I myself, as well as Mr. Matt Salmon, in meeting with the Vice President, relayed that request that the President do make that phone call. And I would suggest it's quite appropriate for other members here, likewise, to contact the White House and make that request.
Well, I think we went to the second guy. Now it's time to go to the guy on top. And I would ask my colleagues to join us today in that telephone call. And finally, let's just hope and pray, and our thoughts are with you. And this is a travesty that a brave hero has been treated like this. He did his duty. It's up to us to do our duty. The President of the United States is not doing his, so let's act on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I yield to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Powell.
Thank the Chairman. Sergeant Tahmooressi, a Marine. He exemplifies exactly what I believe it was Ronald Reagan said about the Marines. There are two groups that understand the Marines: Marines and the enemy. And I think that is a true statement. This hearing, to me, is more than about the way America has handled the situation of your son, Jill. It is an example and a symptom of a bigger problem that our Marines and soldiers that have testified have talked about. The idea that the government released 5 terrorists who killed Americans and are on the battlefield again doing the same thing. They're in Guantanamo. You've been to Guantanamo Bay Prison. People need to see what it's like. It's no Mexican jail. It's a lot better than a Mexican jail. And we have learned about the Mexican incarceration system. As a former judge, I heard a lot about it at the courthouse. But a prisoner, our Marine, being threatened and assaulted while incarcerated, that's wrong, no matter who he is, whether he's a Mexican national or American. But yet we know that's occurred, but still, 6 months later, there he is. And during that 6 months, and this is not about the President, but he has had the opportunity to make a couple of phone calls during that 6 months. He called on July 3rd, the United States men's soccer team, congratulating them. June 20th, he congratulated the San Antonio Spurs head coach for their victory. So he can make those congratulatory calls. Let's just make one more and make a statement to the Mexican president. I have sponsored, along with the chairman, a resolution, House Resolution 620, sponsored by 81 members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, that calls on the Mexican government to release our sergeant. We hope that we can get this resolution adopted at least by action before we have to take a vote on it. And I think the comments about contacting the Mexican president, maybe that's something we ought to be doing. Whatever it takes, there's actions. But that is one avenue we're going through legally to try to get something done. You have all been excellent witnesses. You don't hedge on anything. I wonder why there is no witness here from the State Department, why they're not here testifying what they are doing or not doing about the Marine that we have been talking about. Commander Williams, your comment, going back to about this is bigger, it's a symptom of other things. Our veterans coming back, how they're treated, waiting in line to die at the Veterans Administration Hospital. I have been receiving, and I'm not very IT savvy, but I've been getting constant tweets, I think they're called, from citizens in Texas complimenting you and demanding Congress do something about our Marine. There have been 37 young men and women from my congressional district in Texas killed in Iraq or Afghanistan. Men and women from all races, all branches of the service. Their photographs are on my wall here in Washington, as with many other members. We are not forgetting this Marine. We're not forgetting any of them, whether they were killed in action or whether they're wounded or whether they come back with the wounds of war, as you have talked about. American public, I think, stands with our military, all of them, because as it has been said, the worst casualty of war is to be forgotten. And we're not going to forget those that come back, and we're certainly not going to forget Sergeant Tahmooressi while he's in a Mexican jail. It's long past due to come back. And I think I'm out of time, so I'll yield back to the chairman. I have some questions, but I'll ask you later. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could I please, sir, just make one comment, and I'll hold it really tight.
Please.
For Congressman Poe, I want to thank you, sir, for bringing up House Resolution 620. And as you pointed out, 80 members of Congress, both sides, have signed on to this. But unfortunately, we need to get this to the floor. It would send an incredible message today to the President of the United States if the House and Congress would go ahead and at least call a vote on this. And I should also say that what you stated, the American public knows about Sergeant Tahmooressi, but I don't understand what's going on, sir, at the political level. In the last 12 days, 2 governors have sat down and had conversations, one from each side, with President Nieto, and neither one of them has raised this question, and we've asked them both to do so. I was in a meeting yesterday with an individual who's a grand funder of a lot of the campaigns going on across this country right now. And he sat with President Nieto 4 days ago. And I was in his office yesterday, and I said, why didn't you tell me that? Because I would have called you and asked you to do so. But here's what's unfortunate. Though we're holding this hearing today, most of the American public has some weird idea that he must have done something wrong, that's why you're not backing him. And one of the points that has been made when you talked about the fact that he made a wrong turn and you followed that wrong turn, what people have to understand is that submitted as evidence in the Mexican court right now is the video of Sergeant Tahmooressi pulling up to the checkpoint. And in that checkpoint, they gave him a green light. He could have entered the country, buried his guns, come back, and figured out a way to get one back every week. He put his hands up and said, hey, I made a mistake. Now that right there is clear enough for anybody in America who has to understand this is not us trying to get, for some reason there are some people who claim that he's done something wrong. This is not us trying to get a soldier who's done something wrong back. This is trying to get a soldier back. Sorry, sir.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania. Mr. Marino.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank you all for being here. Mr. Tahmooressi, to you and to your family, from my family, we pray for Andrew daily. And Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter that I wrote that I dated July 10th of 2014 to the Ambassador of Mexico to the United States of America, respectfully asking for the immediate release of Sergeant Tahmooressi. Could I have this letter unanimously entered into the record?
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. I did not receive a response. Again, ma'am, my staff and I will assist the chairman in any way needed or any way in which he requests to continue to work on the release of your son. As Lieutenant Commander Williams said, you and your son and veterans deserve more, have a right to more, and we need to see that that is accomplished. I apologize for how inappropriately you have been treated, and I apologize for the inappropriate level of concern by the White House. I'm truly disappointed in that. The President said on numerous occasions he has a pen and a phone. He can do what he wants. So at this time, Mr. President, I'm asking you to use your pen and your phone that you so continually tell the American people that you're going to use. I'm disappointed that you have to be here today, ma'am. I'm disappointed that vets have not received the appropriate care that they should be receiving in this country. And the President needs to step up and show you the proper attention. Our allies, the Mexican government, also need to do what is right and need to do it immediately. And again, my respect. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. The other gentleman from Texas, Mr. Stockman, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate Congressman Matt Salmon and his efforts throughout all this. In a tangent a little bit, I have to say, if your son's a gun runner, he's one of the worst ones I've ever seen. I mean, to openly admit and raise his hands. Furthermore, I don't think he brought enough to make any money. I mean, it's just so bizarre that this whole thing's upside down, that what's good is bad and bad is good in this nation now. He is unbelievably over there. And I actually sat with the Consul General from Mexico right after he was taken. I gave him a stack of papers on your son. And I said, look, I said, this is going to grow into something really bad for both our countries if you continue to hold our hero. I go, this isn't going to end up well for either of our nations. Please show compassion. I said, you show compassion, you're going to hit the park. You know, we all the time in Texas, we have them come across our border accidentally, and we turn them around. In fact, they were shooting .50 caliber machine guns at us, and we let them go back in. This so-called lack of it's lack of friendship by our allies, supposedly, is so disturbing, and I, for one, am puzzled by it. And I would hope this committee in future hearings reconsiders the amount of money we're sending down there. I don't think we should keep investing in friends. If we have friends like this, we really don't need enemies. And I know we shouldn't get into bashing them, but I'm really frustrated because I see the lack of compassion on their side, and I see compassion on our side, and we just want balance. That's all we ask for. And there are some other people that haven't been announced that have come up on the Hill on your behalf. William Chatfield, who's a Marine, came up here and lobbied, and I don't want to use the word lobby, but spoke on your son's behalf. Larry Ward from Special Operations Speaks has been up here. Sam Bushman, who's a great guy, he's been up here with his organization lobbying on your behalf. And then in my office, Prentice LeBlanc, who's a Marine, has been pushing very hard, and Anna Marie Hoffman, who's been pushing. Some of the things I want to just, I don't know, we're trying to struggle and do something, but it feels like we're pushing against Jell-O sometimes. Every time we push, Congressman Ted Poe's thing. We thought that's going to be the answer, and it seems to fall on deaf ears. We talked to the President's people, it falls on deaf ears. This hearing seems to be falling on deaf ears. We have nobody from the State Department here. We have nobody here that should be here. I mean, you're here, that's great, but there should have other people here that can pull strings that should be in this hearing, hearing this powerful testimony, and they're not here. And that's disappointing to me personally, because I think in the long run, this will do damage to Congress, too, that we haven't taken up, and it will do damage, I think, to the institution of the presidency, that there's so much silence. The silence is deafening. These are our heroes from every standpoint, and we continue to be silent, and it's very disturbing. I guess I would just ask, is there any more we can do to, besides calling the President, but is there anything we can do outside of what we're doing right now that would move the process forward?
Thank you. I mean, just simply, I would like to see more than 81 signatures on the House Resolution 620. So if you could reach out to all your colleagues, because I believe Mexico would find that profoundly intimidating, maybe, if there was more than 81 signatures on that House Resolution 620. But thank you for all of your efforts, and thank you so much for coming in out of session to hear about Andrew's fight for freedom and the plight of our veterans in America. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes a former veteran and congressman from Florida and a dear friend, Congressman DeSantis.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this hearing. Sergeant Tahmooressi is an American hero who fought for us with honor and distinction in accordance with the finest traditions of the United States Marine Corps, and yet he finds himself languishing in a Mexican prison for 6 months. His imprisonment is unjust, and the length of his detention is a national disgrace. I think the witnesses here have been phenomenal. I'm only a first-term member, but I've sat through a lot of congressional hearings, and I really want to applaud you, because I think you all have brought tremendous insight into this issue, and I think it will help educate the American people about Andrew's plight. But it's inexplicable to me that this is even necessary to have this. This should have been resolved long ago, and people have mentioned that we would like to see action from the White House. It's interesting, if you look, 22 U.S.C. 1732, this is the law of the land right now, states, whenever it is made known to the President that any citizen of the United States has been unjustly deprived of his liberty by or under the authority of any foreign government, it shall be the duty of the President forthwith to demand of that government the reason of such imprisonment, and if it appears to be wrongful and in violation of the rights of American citizenship, the President shall forthwith demand the release of such citizen. If the release so demanded is unreasonably delayed or refused, the President shall use such means, not amounting to acts of war and not otherwise prohibited by law, as he may think necessary and proper to obtain or effectuate the release. And all the facts and proceedings relative thereto shall as soon as practicable be communicated by the President to Congress. I am not aware of the President taking any action so far to bring our Marine back, and I don't think we've received any information in Congress about actions that have been taken. So I would say, Mr. President, we have a man down. Pick up the phone and do your job on behalf of our Marine. And I think it could be solved very quickly with that, but I do think, even though it's the President's duty, and I think this falls on him, we do need to speak in Congress, and not just in a hearing, not just in press releases, but in actual votes. And so that means, absolutely, we call up House Resolution 620, and we vote it out of the House of Representatives. It means, I believe, to say to Mexico, we send you hundreds of millions of dollars in foreign assistance. That money stops until our Marine is brought back to the United States. We need to stop talking in this town and start acting. So I am very glad that you called this hearing. I would like to see more action, and I think that there are a lot of other things that the President could do. Obviously, pick up the phone. We have a lot of leverage we can use on Mexico to secure our Marines' release, and this needs to happen as expeditiously as possible, and I yield back.
I would like to just say for the record that when we go back into session, if our man is not back home, we will be moving that bill, and we'll be moving it out of the subcommittee, and I will have every intention to work with leadership to get it expedited on the floor as quickly as possible. I do have a sneaking suspicion and a very optimistic view that good things are going to happen very, very soon. And Congressman from Florida, I know we've all heard that before, but I have reason to believe that maybe some optimism might be in vogue right now. I recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Yoho.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you, Chairman Royce, Mr. Hunter, for going and doing what you've done, the stellar work you've done. I want to thank you all for showing up and doing, again, I agree with everybody up here that you guys have done a great job. And Mrs. Tahmooressi, the story you're telling exemplifies only the love and concern a mother or a parent can have for a child. And the things that you've shared with us are great. I mean, I'm reading this here, you know, says, Mom, I did this. Mom, I scheduled my solo flight. And you went through this whole list, and the last one I can't read because it's just, it's too disturbing. But to hear the excitement of our kids, Mom or Dad, I did this, and then to have this turn out, to me, it's just unconscionable that we've gotten to this point. And I think of everything that we've gone through in this country with our relationship with Mexico, and it's been brought up. They get $300 million a year in foreign aid. They're a neighbor. They're a friend. They're a trading partner. They're an ally. And they don't send their young to defend freedom around this globe as we do. Again, the story you're telling, it's interesting how you brought out the paths and turns that we make in life often lead us in the wrong direction. But how many of us have made a wrong turn that have had this kind of consequence in our life? Not many of us, especially as rapidly as it has for your son, and monumental for a wrong turn. And I see a young man that went down there who made a wrong turn, realized he made a wrong turn, goes to the security guards and says, hey, listen, I made a wrong turn. I want to go back to America. And oh, by the way, I have 3 guns. I'm telling you what I did. Now, if you're, as it was brought up, if you were doing that to smuggle them in there, you wouldn't say that. So obviously, it was a mistake. It was a wrong turn. They need to let him go. And for our president not to stand up to demand his release, yet he negotiated and released, and I feel illegally, 5 of the all-star players on the Taliban team for one of our Marines. And I'm always happy to get one of our soldiers home. But if we can do that, and he can do that, he can do this, and just ask for him to be returned. We don't want to make an international incident out of this. We just want our Marine home. We want your son, your comrades home. We want him home. And I guess I just want to say, I, as a U.S. Congressman, I apologize to the President of Mexico that our Marine, one of our citizens, came into your country and made a wrong turn. And he admitted that. And I apologize he made a mistake, and I hope you find in your heart the ability to forgive him and release him so that we can put this to an end and he can get on with his life and with his treatment. And I just want to thank all of you that have served. You know, we're well aware of the 22 suicides that happen every day in this country. And we need to get him back and get him treated. And I thought it was also interesting that President Obama with Sergeant Bergdahl stated that it was a medical emergency. It was a risk to his life that we bring this young man home. And if that was true then, It's true now. And I urge this President to pick up the phone and use his pen and bring this man home. And with that, I'm going to yield back. We're with you. We'll do whatever we can, and God bless you all.
Thank you. I recognize the gentleman from California, who is also a former veteran, also worked tirelessly on behalf of Sergeant Tahmooressi, a great guy and a good colleague, Duncan Hunter.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks very much for holding this, and thank you, everybody, for coming out. You know, number one, we don't call it the Marine Corps. We call it America's Marine Corps. Sergeant Tahmooressi is a son of America. He's a Marine who fought for every single person. When we have Marine generals testify, they say it's your Marine Corps. It's America's Marine Corps, and that's how we should be looking at this case. You know, frankly, I'm tired of the lip service, of the thanks for your service, while I watch the President give speeches in front of our men and women in uniform so that he can look sexy on television, because it's just lip service. He doesn't care. Secretary Kerry does not care. And the State Department, for all the little things that they've done for you, they have not gone out of their way. In fact, the first lawyer that you got was off of their website that they vetted. They do not care. But people in this room care. I would say, too, that when a parent gives their son or daughter up and entrusts their lives to the U.S. military, to the United States Marine Corps, you gave your son up for your country. And he did it willingly and proudly. And I look at those pictures popping up. He is a stud. He is a young killer of bad people. And that's why he joined to go serve his country. And to see him now and what they have reduced him to in Mexico, and to read that excerpt that you said he told you, where he was tied spread eagle and beaten and threatened with rape, that is appalling. This isn't Yemen. This isn't Somalia. This is supposed to be one of our #1 neighbors, Mexico. But I would advise everybody, we don't allow our Marines at Camp Pendleton, where I was stationed, we don't allow them to go to Mexico. The sailors in San Diego, not allowed to go to Mexico. Mexico is more than Rosarita, Cozumel, Ensenada. In Mexico, they make $5 a day. That's their new minimum wage. It is not a first world country. There's a reason we don't allow our Marines and sailors to go to Mexico from San Diego. They don't get leave chits there at Camp Pendleton. They're not allowed to do it. Andrew does not just deserve this, and he doesn't have a right to this hearing and to this attention. He's earned it, along with about 1% of the U.S. population who was served in the military. And an even smaller slice of that is served in combat situation. He's earned this attention here today. He's earned this Congress coming together and this committee holding this. This is what we're here for. This is why we're in Congress. This is why we run for Congress and win, is to represent people like him so we can go fight for him when people like our own president won't. And I'll tell you what, I'm tired of hearing about the president making a phone call. What kind of a low bar do we have set for this president? We ask him to make a phone call. He got to get his tail down and play some of those Mexican golf courses and get him out of jail in person. That is a low bar to set for the Commander-in-Chief, a Commander-in-Chief that should go to hell and back for one of their men or women who has been left behind, as has been stated. I have a question for the panel. Would you allow your Marines or soldiers to go to Mexico today? Mr. Hegseth?
No, Congressman.
Sergeant?
Negative, Congressman.
Commander? Jill, would you allow your son or any of your friends or their kids to go to Mexico?
It's too dangerous. No, I wouldn't.
In 2011, when Afghanistan was raging, you had 9 times more likely of a chance to be killed in Mexico than to be killed in Afghanistan. 9 times. Afghanistan was safer than Mexico was. This does not sound like a good neighbor. It doesn't sound like a neighbor that makes our Ford trucks and does deals with all of our big American corporations so that they can have $5 a day labor in Mexico. You know, Mexico stole Andrew's chance at a quick recovery. And I think that Montel hit that right on the head. They stole his chance at a quick recovery. by getting rid of this case and acquitting him or throwing this case out now, today, or this week, or sometime soon, they at least set him on a slow uphill path to being healed. And I'll tell you, Montel, you are dead on. This is much worse than Afghanistan. He'd probably want to go serve 2 or 3 tours in the most horrible, dirtiest, grittiest combat place on earth than sit in a third world country jail. So thank you all for what you're doing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for doing this. And God help us if we can't get one of our own back out of the clutches of a not so great government like Mexico.
Thank you. I recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Jolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the panelists, thank each of you for your service. I want to associate myself with comments of my colleagues, particularly Mr. Hunter. You know, we're elected to work. We're elected to actually get things done, as members of Congress, and the President is as well. Every member of this panel, every member of this body at some point has probably run against the dysfunction of Washington. And when we're elected, we don't have the luxury of resigning ourselves to that dysfunction. We have a responsibility to work. That means holding hearings like this, and that means actually putting your name on important pieces of legislation like House Resolution 620. The issue clearly is leadership. The facts are as clear as they can be. We have established today that we have to get Andrew home, that the President has not done enough, but also, importantly, as Mr. Hegseth said, that PTS is real. And we've talked about getting Andrew home, but we've also talked about a very important condition, and that is PTS. My question for Ms. Tahmooressi is, can you walk us through very briefly, because I'll have a couple other questions, as a mom, what you noticed in Andrew as PTS began to progress with him?
Thank you. He got out of active duty October 2012 and pretty much immediately enrolled in Embry-Riddle. He was accepted in January. That probably wasn't the wisest thing to do because it is hard to acclimate from the battlefield into a college environment, especially when you have a difficult time relating to your peer group now. So I think it began just having a difficult time relating to the peer group. He would see a classroom full of, you know, people his age, but they were disrespectful. They talk, you know, they got up and left. And, you know, a Marine, you know, you definitely bow down to authority. So he started getting aggravated, frustrated. He was having flashbacks, really difficult time sleeping. So he would wake up screaming, and we would hear him, you know, wake up screaming. So a lot of restless nights, agitation, and also suspicion. As the year progressed in 13, he did have a hypervigilance to self-defense. He still had what I call a hunter-prey syndrome. I don't know if that's really a legitimate word, but to me, he was always hypervigilant, and 13 is when he purchased his concealed weapon. So he had the shotgun in 2007 when he went to Alaska, but then he felt the need to have himself armed with a handgun. And being a Marine, he carried a rifle for those 4 years, and he was responsible for the biggest gun on the battlefield, a 50 caliber. Okay. So when he made his his second purchase in 13, which was his third firearm, the rifle, that also kind of made sense to us. I mean, we knew that that was his tool of the trade. That's what kept him alive for 4 years.
Let me pause just a second because of time.
Yes.
I want to be respectful of time.
Yes.
We know we have a wait list. I've had a conversation with a mother like you referred to, Mr. Hegseth, somebody awaiting treatment within the VA and then committed suicide while on the wait list. What do we need to do more?
As the Congressman said, delayed care is denied care. And we hear all the time from the VA, well, it's great when you get in. If you can't get in, you don't get the treatment that you need. We have to cut through the bureaucracy. We have to hold leaders accountable for their performance. We need to provide transparency. And we need to give a veteran a choice. If they can't be seen in a timely manner from a VA facility, why can't they go to a private facility to get that care?
Put a choice card in the hand of every veteran and let them control their health care. That's the answer to shattering the failure of the VA bureaucracy right now.
Introduce a little competition.
You're right. I've got a question, one last question. Mr. Williams, you made an extremely powerful statement in your opening statement today that you couldn't counsel your son to put on the uniform and carry the flag of our nation. That appears to be a failure in leadership, probably systemic, perhaps in this body as well as the administration. My question for you is, what do you need to see change to find yourself in a position to say yes to your son, to say it is okay to put on the uniform and carry the flag?
Knows that over the course of the last 4 or 5 months, I have been extremely vocal, and I'm not going to let up. You know, I gave the president and this last bill the 90 days that was requested to make a change. So I'm keeping my mouth shut for about another 35 days. But at the end of 35 days, believe me, I'm not going to stop, because all the claims that were made in this bill that was passed, so far I don't believe these things are being implemented. Just the idea that the fact that our soldiers were supposed to have the right to go and visit outside hospitals and get assistance if they couldn't get it, that's not happening as quickly as we think. And one of the things, giving a card to say, go see a civilian, each one of these soldiers has said this, and they'll say it over and over again. We need to be with our brothers. The simplest thing that this body could do and Congress could do is authorize our veterans to go to DOD facilities. Augment those facilities to see those troops. Right. This is where we grew up being treated. Why should we not be treated by the same people right now? You could end the backlog immediately.
Well, and the card is intended to empower the individual to stay in the VA, go to DOD, stay with their guys if they want to, but if they need immediate assistance elsewhere and they want to go there, put the individual in charge of their own health care. Yes, let them control their own health care. Thank you. I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. This hearing has been a fantastic hearing. Jill, you know, I know that not so long ago, just a few short hours ago, you were actually in Mexico, sitting outside the courtroom as ordered by the judge to support your son. And now here you are across the country here in Washington, D.C. as a tireless advocate and a wonderful example of what an American mother is all about. So thank you. God bless you. And all of you panel members, you know, your service is truly humbling. And I think that the consensus of this panel discussion, which focuses on a brave soldier who gave his country his everything, it is a lot broader. It's about, do we stand for those who stand for us or not? Do we stand for them? And Mr. Jolly, you made reference to you know, the Veterans Administration. So we chuck $17 billion at them, and we do this like we've really pat ourselves on the back like we've really done something stupendous. Well, I'll tell you something. In the last 60 days, the calls haven't stopped. Not in my office, not with my case workers. And I don't see anything changing, and I don't see anything better. And I'm dubious that it will get better until major changes happen, until there's a major mindset change within our country that we really do care about those that care about us, that we send into harm's way. This is a case of a young man who served our country proudly, who is suffering from PTSD, who is now languishing in a Mexican prison. I implore the President to do what a Commander-in-Chief should do, and that's use everything that he's got to get this young man home. I implore the government of Mexico to do the right thing. Laws are there for two things: to provide safety for its citizenry, but also to enact justice. We know what justice would be. Justice in this case would be to have this young man home being treated for PTSD. That is justice. That is compassion, but that is justice. I thank everybody for being here at the hearing. I thank you for taking the time. I thank the members for coming across the country. Tulsi, I think you win the award for coming the furthest from Hawaii. But this hearing is concluded, and God bless.